Hi friends, it's been quite some time that we have met through this platform. As you would know that earlier I have done two important legislations. One is an explanation of Code on Industrial Relations and the second one was on Code on Wages. The third in the series today we are going to discuss about Code on Social Security 2020. I understand there was some gap because I was struck with some family issues for last 1 month. Therefore, I couldn't do this particular video, which was being asked by many of you. But nevertheless, let's go into the Code on Social Security 2020 and see how it impacts all of us in our day-to-day lives. So earlier, the Code of Wages has consolidated four legislations. Industrial Relations Code has consolidated three legislations, but Code on Social Security 2020 has in a way amalgamated or consolidated 9 important legislations which were there. So basically, we are talking about 9 earlier acts being condensed to one act. Now the acts which have been merged or consolidated are, first among them is of course the Employee Provident Fund Act or the PF Act. The second one is the ESI Act. The third one is the Maternity Benefit Act. The fourth one is the Payment of Gratuity Act. The fifth one is Employee Compensation Act or Workmen Compensation Act as it used to be called earlier. The sixth one is the BOCW Act or Building and Other Construction Workers Act. The seventh one is the Employment Exchanges Act. The eighth one is the Cine Workers Act, and the ninth one is the act which was promulgated by government in 2008 related to the unorganized workers, which is called the Unorganized Workers Social Security Act. So basically 9 acts have been consolidated to one single piece of legislation. That's the first important aspect which I wanted to highlight. Moving on to the important provisions. Friends, as you would agree, in Western countries, the concept of social security has been evolved over last almost 100 years. Now in Western countries, especially whenever somebody loses a job or somebody is in old age or in terms of healthcare, there are certain safeguards which are available to almost every citizen. Now unlike the same, in India, most of these acts have been operating for the organized workers or the organized employees. That brings to the question that a lot of the unorganized sector is left behind without any coverage on social security. And the first time, I think it is quite historical, that under section 278 of the Code on Social Security Act, the term social security in our country is defined. And it has a quite an interesting definition in terms of saying that social security would broadly encompass certain amount of payments or certain facilities as regards the healthcare, the payments which the employee or the worker would be entitled at the time of superannuation, or if he sustains any injury, and so on. So basically, this is the first legislation which is talking about certain social security benefits, not just for the organized sector but also for the unorganized sector. And it also has responded to the growing need of recognizing different set of workers who may not work in a typical factory or office, but who may be working from their home, who may be working part-time, who may be working full-time, who may be only an online workers. So I think the term worker has been expanded a lot. One, and second thing, all such workers, the act calls them gig workers, platform workers, unorganized sector workers, and everybody has been brought under the ambit of social security. And this is something which we all need to appreciate the government, because for the first time social security as a concept has been defined under section 278 of the Code on Social Security. If you look at the chapters in which this code is arranged, chapter 3 relates to the provisions of PF, chapter 4 relates to the erstwhile provisions of ESI, chapter 5 are those related to gratuity, and chapter 7 relates to the Employee Compensation Act. This is the broadly an amalgamation or the consolidation of the earlier acts which have been brought into different chapters. Now, in terms of PF, as you all are aware, that the statutory applicability of PF is only for those employees or those workers who are within the PF ceiling of 15,000 rupees basic plus DA. Now, the first time in this act, the government has not defined any particular wage ceiling in the act itself, but it says that the person or the worker or the employee who is covered under the EPF Act or the ESI Act is something which is left to the government and on a basis of a notification which the government would give from time to time. So therefore, we can probably assume that lot many people would be brought under the ambit of PF as against the current case of only those earning basic plus DA of 15,000. Of course, those who wants to join PF and who are drawing above 15,000, the same provision continues to be in the new code as well. Nothing much changes as far as the PF provisions are concerned, except one provision. In case of exempted establishments, you would know under para 17 of the EPF scheme 1952, any establishment could apply for being an exempted establishment as long as it maintained its own provident fund trust. There was no ceiling as regards the number of employees which are required. Now, first time, the Code on Social Security says that in case an establishment wants exemption from the Provident Fund Act, that exemption can only be granted if you have a minimum of 100 employees. So this is something different from the earlier scheme of things. Otherwise, the provisions broadly are same as regards the Employee Provident Fund Act. Many of the rules and the other details have to be notified. The only thing is in terms of wage ceiling being kept under the notification. Coming to ESI, again as I told you, the major change which one would notice is the wage ceiling has been kept as part of a notification which the government would give from time to time. Nothing much changes. Earlier we had a gross salary ceiling of 21,000 that is going. That will probably be under the realm of a notification which the government would issue from time to time. One of the major provisions which would attract all of us from a new code, and that too something related to the erstwhile ESIR, those related to the accident arising out of and in course of employment. Now we all know that the ESI as well as the Employee Compensation Act always had provisions that in case of any accident or an accident or occupational injury or a disease, occupational disease has been contracted by an employee out of and in course of employment, the dependent benefit or the disabled benefit would be paid by the ESI or the employer in case he is out of coverage of ESI. Now, the important provisions which have been included in the new act is, in case an employee is traveling from his place of residence to his place of work and back from office to his place of residence, earlier that was not covered under ESI or Employee Compensation Act explicitly. When I mean explicitly, the acts never prescribe that in case an employee meets with an accident while he is traveling either to the workplace or back to the home, it was never covered explicitly under either ESI Act or Employee Compensation Act. However, as we would know, there was something called doctrine of notional extension of employment. That means the boundaries of the factory or an office were notionally extended to cover the residence of the employee, and therefore any accident which would occur was part of the benefit. Now, for the first time, and this was mostly an interpretation of courts. There are many Supreme Court judgments which say that in case the employee is traveling from home to office or vice versa and he meets with an accident, it can be termed as part of or arising either in course of employment. However, the Code on Social Security makes it very explicit when it says that in case there is a possible nexus between the time of accident and the factory timings or the time of work which the employee has attended, the accident or the injury shall be deemed to be arised out of and in course of employment. Now, this is one of the important provisions which definitely are employee friendly, because there are times especially in the morning shift, or once the employee is going back during the night shift, there is always a possibility that if he or she meets with any accident, uh, there is no need to depend on any interpretations of the any court. There are clear provision of the act which has now been instituted, and the employee would get benefit. And the second important aspect as regards accident is, even if the employee has acted in contravention of any of the orders given by the employer, and due to that contravention, if an accident has arisen, it shall be deemed to have been arised out of and in course of employment. And this is especially for the ESI benefit. This definition has been made very wide. You would agree that there are certain times when the employee would probably act not in accordance with the rules or the procedures prescribed by the employer, and in case he meets with an accident, it is deemed to be an accident or an injury arising out of and in course of employment, because that is in connection with the business or trade or operations of the employer. And I think this is one of the major changes which is coming, which was not there in the earlier enactment. So in terms of coverage of travel from home to office and office to home, and the second important aspect is presumption as to the accident arising out of and in course of employment. Another important provisions, friends, this is much for waiting, I would call, especially those who are in the unorganized sectors, the building workers, the workers who work on the roads. There are many such unorganized sectors of workers for whom the ESA benefit has always been deprived. And I think not only them, there are other kind of workers who may not be in the formal employment, as I just told earlier, but they may want a healthcare system for them and their families. So under section 45, it empowers the government, or rather it directs the government to frame such a healthcare scheme which the ESA would offer to the normal employees, and the same sort of benefits are to be offered to the unorganized or the platform workers or the gig workers in order to provide them the healthcare. I think this is one of the most welcome sections. So these are some of the top 2-3 changes which are there from the earlier ESI Act compared to the Code on Social Security. So that's it, nothing major changes. All the benefits have been retained, whether it is the sickness benefit, whether it is the dependent benefit, whether it is the maternity benefit, all sorts of benefits have been retained in the new Code on Social Security, except the changes we just discussed. As regards gratuity, now here is one of the most interesting provision, I would call, and this provision does not arise just because of any changes in the gratuity provisions per se, but it arises because the change of the definition of wages. And we have discussed this in Code on Wages, and that continues to be the subject even under Code on Social Security. Now, when is gratuity payable under the new Act? The same provisions by and large. One has to complete 5 years of service, and gratuity is payable either on superannuation or retirement or exit or death, or on the expiry of the fixed term contract, or on the happening of any such event which the central government would notify. Now this is one of the interesting provision, especially gratuity payable on termination of fixed term employment or happening of any of such event which central government would notify. This is one of the very wide interpretations this particular provision can have, because we don't know what is that event under which the gratuity is payable, which the central government would declare. Also, there is a provision that the completion of 5 years shall not be mandatory or necessary. One, in case of death, we know even in earlier cases, if it was an employee had died in service, the mandatory 5 years period is not required. So that still continues. But in addition, the completion of 5 years will not be required when the termination happens, either because the mandatory 5 years completion is not required when an employee's fixed term contract is being terminated. That means even if a FTC employee is ceasing to be in employment before 5 years, also the gratuity is payable. Or again, the provision says that are happening of any such event which the central government would notify. So two things. One, the gratuity is payable for the typical cases of death, superannuation, retirement, resignation. It will continue. The fifth category is FTC, when on the expiry of the fixed term employment. The sixth category is on happening of any such event which central government would notify. So these are the 6 cases under which the gratuity is payable. In addition, the mandatory 5 years period is not required in case of FTC, death, or any such event which the central government would notify. So this probably has to evolve, or we need clarity on this as to what it constitutes, what are those events in which this gratuity is payable in addition to the normal cases which we know, or which are those circumstances in which the 5 years is 5 years service is not required. We know in case of death and termination of FTC it is not required, but there are some other cases also which central government can notify under the act. So this has some wide powers to central government, and we are actually not aware of what those events could probably be. And the second important aspect, which there's a lot of debate, discussion in a lot of social media and everywhere, is on the quantum of gratuity. Yes, the gratuity per se would probably increase. There is an implication for employers in terms of the provisions for gratuity or the valuation of the actuarial service. And the reason for this is precisely because the definition of wages, and whether it was under code on wages or under code on social security, has undergone a change. So basically, to deal with it, there are certain inclusions and there are certain exclusions. So as long as the wages, which is basic plus DA and all such allowances which are included, form part of 50% of the overall CTC or overall components, the absolute amount of gratuity would increase, because it's not just on the basic plus DA, because the definition of wages is changing. Now in case if the basic plus DA is less than 50%, obviously you need to increase the basic plus DA to by that percentage, so as to equate it to 50%, and therefore to that extent the gratuity would increase on the termination of employment. So I think because of the definition of code on wages or code on social security, the gratuity amount per se would increase, especially in those cases where the basic plus DA or basic is not at least 50% of the total emolument, subject to certain exclusions like HRA and conveyance allowances and bonuses. One more provision related to gratuity is that earlier the compulsory insurance which the employer had to take for his gratuity payment, it was mandated that the compulsory insurance is only be taken from Life Insurance Corporation of India, or which is the LIC. Now it has been more liberalized. The government has authorized that the compulsory insurance can be brought from any of the insurance companies recognized by the IRDA. So again, this is bringing a bit of a flexibility, that you can choose with whom to insure your gratuity liability, not just with LIC as was the case earlier. Now it's open that any of the IRDA approved insurance companies can offer the gratuity insurance coverage. As regards maternity benefit, the mandatory clause of 80 days of work in a preceding 12 months would continue to apply. The only change is in case the employer is not giving prenatal facilities to the women. The medical bonus was earlier 1,000, that is now being increased to 3,500. That's the one change with regard to the maternity benefit. But the important change, friends, is regards the crèche. As you know, the Maternity Benefit Act was amended in 2016, especially to include that any establishment employing 50 or more employees, it was not necessarily women employees, it was 50 or more any employees needed to have a crèche facility. Now it was for many companies, big, small, medium, not to mention about them, they had certain challenges to comply with this provision, because one, probably they were not much takers, and two, given the size and the location, it was probably difficult to manage the crèche. So a welcome change here, which the Code on Social Security has brought about, is that it has enabled employers or NGOs to have a common crutch. For example, in an industrial estate or an industrial area, there are about 10 employers. All of them can pool up the resources and form a crutch, and probably then can distribute the usage, and not necessarily each of those 10 establishments need to have a crutch. So this facility of having a common crutch, and it also has a provision that the common crutch can be of that which is central government can set up, or a state government, or an NGO, or the employers themselves can pull up and set up a crutch. So this gives a lot of flexibility, and I'm sure given that many of industries which are situated in a lot of these industrial estates, SCZs and the industrial parks, there would be many employers who would come together and form a crutch, and probably the usage can then be distributed, and you are still compliant, you are extending the facility to the woman employee, and the exact burden on a particular company is not also that high. So I think this is one welcome change which has come about in terms of the crutch facility. And also we would always have even in cases where the crutches are located, I particularly faced a challenge as to how many breaks should we give. Though the ESA, the Maternity Benefit Act, says that the 2 nursing breaks have to be given to a woman who returns from the maternity, but in case where the crutch is available, no act till date has defined the number of breaks. So the Code on Social Security is defined that a woman has to be given at least 4 breaks during the day, so as to visit the crutch to take care of her child. I think this 4, and this 4 also includes 2 nursing breaks which she is entitled either under the ESI Act or under the Maternity Benefit Act. So this is broadly under these are the broadly the provisions under the Maternity Benefit Act, much relaxed crutch provisions, and also defining the number of breaks which are to be provided to the woman so as to take care of her child in the crutch. As regards Employee Compensation Act, I think the same provisions continue. In case any injury results which prevents an employee for attending to duty for 20 or more days, you need to notify to the concerned authority as regards the injury, in addition to in case the person is outside ESA or outside factory. And the second thing is, in case the accident arising out of and in course of employment, the employer is liable for compensation, except 3 cases have been identified. Now I think ESI, the provisions related to ESI benefit in the Act are much more liberal than the provisions related to the Employee Compensation Act provisions, because here, in case the employee tampers with any of the safety devices or safety guards, or in case he is under the influence of drugs, or he violates any of the orders given for securing his safety, under these 3 circumstances, the employer is not liable to pay compensation. These are the same provisions which were there earlier, but only thing is, if you look at the Code on Social Security, the provision related to accident are much more liberal in the chapter related to ESI compared to those with the chapter related to the Employee Compensation Act. Other than this, there's no much change. In addition, friends, as regards the Employment Exchange Act also, which has been repealed, now the government is coming up with a concept of career center, not probably a age-old employment exchange. Probably it's a name change. We don't know what a career center would typically mean, but the intent is to encourage employment, to help people to connect them to the jobs. And the employment exchange provisions have the same provisions that we need to notify any of the vacancies to the career center, either electronically or through hard copy. And it is no mandate to recruit the candidates sponsored from the career center. I think that's again, it was similar provisions were there, but it makes very obvious that there is no pressure or there is no mandate to refer or select any of the candidates referred by the career center. That's it. I think we have covered all the major aspects or the changes from the earlier acts. Remember, Code on Social Security is one of the significant pieces of legislation which will impact our lives. So friends, thank you very much once again for watching and patronizing Malladi Vlogs. I hope this session will be liked by you, and you would note the key changes and implement in your day-to-day life. Feel free to reach out to me through the vlog or through various other channels, and please do subscribe and share our channel, and also share the content among your HR fraternity and colleagues so that they also benefit from the session. Thank you very much.